Hey y'all, it's Chris with Rockin Farm. Today we are in the garden and we are going to talk onions. But before we do, hit that subscribe button for me, click that notification bell, and go check out the website, rockin8farm.com. Y'all, I love growing onions for so many reasons. As a matter of fact, I think onions are just like my wife. Onions are reliable like my wife. Onions are dependable like my wife. Onions are even somewhat predictable, and believe it or not, my wife is pretty predictable too. Onions are also great communicators. Okay, so onions are almost just like my wife. So why do I say that onions are so predictable and they're great communicators and all that good stuff? They just are. They always tell you exactly what it is that they need. As long as you follow the initial instructions, plant them in rows that are at least 8 inches apart, plant the individual bulbs 4 inches from each other in each row, give them a good bone meal fertilizer to get that phosphorus level up there. And then after that, they will talk to you. They will tell you if they need more fertilizer. They will tell you if they need more water. They will tell you if they need less water. And most importantly, they will tell you when it is time to harvest them. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because we are just about there. So y'all, I am going to, hello, Violetta the pig, AKA Kiwi. So the bed we're going to start on right here is a good one for us to start on. This half of the bed here is planted with red onions, and these red onions are not ready to harvest yet. How do I know that they're not ready to harvest? As you can see, a few of these red onions are starting to lay down. There's a bunch that laid down right there. But if you look across the bed, the vast majority of these onions are still standing upright. So this is a bed that we're definitely going to wait on. It's not quite ready to go. The onions are starting to lay over, but the vast majority of them are still standing upright. Now this bed over here is my white onions, and as you can see, I've got some nice big bulbs, and we're actually at a point where the vast majority of these are laying down. Now I'm actually going to hold off on this bed a little bit too, not because it's not ready for me to do the next step, but because it rained yesterday, it rained today. There's a very good possibility that it's going to rain tomorrow. I need some time to get ready to harvest these onions, because one thing you don't want when you're harvesting onions is a lot of moisture. And I'm not watering these beds, we're just getting a lot of moisture right now. Now typically with a bed like this where we've got a big chunk of them laying down and ready to go, I would come in and I would encourage the rest of them to lay down. Now, I would say actually by looking at this bed that this bed is about 65% laying down and the rest are erect. So we're actually going to wait a little bit on this bed anyhow, because I like to wait until about more like 85 or 90% of the onions are laying down. Now what laying down encourages the onion to do, it basically sends that message to the onion of, hey, stop the bulbing process. And then the tops of the greens will really start to dry out. They'll start to yellow and dry out, and then you know it's time to harvest. There have been years where I have seen the onions get very yellow before they lay down. And then there's been years like this one here where the onions are relatively green and we've gotten some moisture. And I think it's just kind of nature's way of saying, hey, we've gotten a lot of water and we don't want you to get any bigger, so let's stop the growing process. That green laying down is kind of like kinking a garden hose as far as the growing process goes. Now you can see when these greens lay down, see there's no firmness left in that green stalk right there at all. It's very, very floppy. So if this garden had laid down a bit more, well, actually, I'll just go show you on a garden that is ready. So this is the white onions. Again, in a day or so, we'll be ready for the next steps. But let me show you a garden bed that's ready now. These are the Texas Sweets, and as you can see, a solid 90, maybe even 95% of these onions have already laid down on their own. If you take a look, we have some absolutely gorgeous giant onions in here. These are our favorite onion by far, these Texas Sweets. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna come in and to all of the onions that aren't laying down, we're actually gonna take and bend that stalk. We're gonna break that right there at the top of the bulb, and we're gonna lay them down. So I'm gonna go through this entire garden, and I'm just gonna lay these stalks down and encourage them to stop the bulbing process. As you can see, it does not take a whole lot of effort, and that's because these onions are ready. They're ready to be done growing. All right, so the next part is going to be a little bit tricky because of the weather that we've been having. So typically, because these aren't really all that yellow and all that dry, I would bend them, stop the bulbing process, let them sit in the garden for a few days with no water, and let that green part on top start to dry out. Because we've had so much rain, I can't control the fact that I can't cut off the water. One of the things I thought about doing in prior years was like putting a tarp over them to protect them from the rain. But then you're just encouraging mildew and mold and all kinds of stuff in those damp conditions underneath the tarp. So that's not really a go-to workaround either. So what we're most likely going to do with these is not today, but probably sometime tomorrow, we're going to pull all these onions. Now, again, typical year, you would pull all these onions and just leave them in the garden beds. What I actually like to do is lay one onion down and then lay the next onion down so that the greens cover the bulb. Pull the next one, lay it down so that its greens cover the bulb of the one before it. And that prevents any sunburn on the bulbs. You would leave them in the garden for 2 or 3 days until those greens start to get really dry and crispy. And then you would go through the next step in the process. I'm not going to be able to do that in this garden because we're expecting rain throughout the next several days. So I'm going to go invent something that is probably going to involve chicken wire and stretching between some rafters or something in a nice airy place. Then what I'll do is I'll harvest all of these onions and I'll lay them out on the chicken wire and I'll let them dry that way. So I've got to figure out a place on my property where A, it's going to be protected from the rain, and B, I can lay something out where they're really going to get good airflow. I'm thinking probably something in the barn, maybe something under our carport awning. I'm not sure. I'll actually let you guys know what I decide to do and give you a little sneak peek of it. But that's what we're going to have to do because of the rain, is get these onions harvested, and rather than leaving them in the garden to dry for a few days, hanging them on some sort of a rack in a nice airflow situation so that they can do their drying and curing process there. Now there's a few more steps to onions after that, but I figure I'll show you those steps when I get ready to do them. So right now what I wanted to show you was the onions are great communicators and tell you when they're ready to be harvested part of it. And then the what do we have to do to prepare for harvest part of it. So as we do more work with the onions over the next couple of days or couple of weeks, I'll make sure to give you some more information on what to do next. And until I see you then, this has been Chris with Rockin Farm. Be happy and live healthy.